Yeah, I was a director of development. I mean, we were sort of a non-titular company, but yeah, I was a junior development executive. My job was to find things that he could star in or produce, or writers who could write the kind of things that he could star in or produce. And I was reading a lot. I was taking home a banker's box full of scripts every weekend, reading everything I could get my hands on. And my boss would ask me on Monday morning if I had read anything that he needed to prioritize. And more often than not, the answer was no, because writing something that you can walk into your boss's office and slam down on the desk and say, this is our priority now, it's a really high standard. And I felt like I wasn't doing a very good job in finding those good things and needed to find a more efficient way to find them.
So again, you were working for Leonardo DiCaprio's production company.
Yeah.
You were young and in Hollywood and trying to kind of make your way.
Yeah.
Most of what you were reading was underwhelming.
Yeah.
And as an outgrowth of this work and all of this reading of screenplays, The Blacklist was born.
Yeah. It's funny. I came to Hollywood, I think, as a person who revered writers to begin with. I'm like, these are the people that go into a room by themselves and like create entire worlds on the page. And, I think, as most people probably realize, and I was maybe naive to this before I arrived in the industry, that's not generally the orientation of most people in the industry, the sort of veneration of writers. And my job was to find good writers and good scripts. And I felt like I wasn't doing a great job at that. My mother used to call me every week and ask me if my LSAT scores were still valid. And I really didn't want to go to law school, but I realized that if I couldn't find a solution to this problem, maybe I should. And surveyed, I think, 90 people that I knew that had jobs similar to mine, that I had breakfast, lunch, dinner, or drinks with, about their favorite unproduced screenplays that they had read that year. I sent an anonymous sort of survey asking them to send me their favorite scripts, and in exchange combined that list and sent it back out to everybody who voted. And it went viral, pretty early in the days of internet virality, 2005, but it became this thing that people used to find great scripts or to, there's a list of things that maybe they should read and prioritize as well.
And so I want to say it was 93 executives and studio assistants who first replied, like the first Blacklist.
Yeah.
That was how many people were involved. And I'm curious to know if there were like more complicated criteria than I'm imagining, or was it simply what's the best thing you've read?
No, I asked people for a list of up to 10 of their favorite scripts that met 3 criteria. The first was that they loved the script. The second was that they had read it that calendar year. And the third was that it wouldn't be in theaters by the end of that calendar year. So it's super, super simple.
And then 2 years later, I want to say, the LA Times outed you as the creator of the Blacklist. And talk about that and like maybe how that changed things for you personally, but also just changed maybe the perception of the Blacklist within the industry.
Well, I think, so the first list came out in December 2005. I did it again the next year. Anonymously. And then in January of 2007, if I remember correctly, they outed me as the person who had created it. I think for me personally, things changed because by then the list had already become something of an arbiter of taste in the business. And I think people probably conflated the good job of finding good material that this process that I had created had resulted in, and my own taste. Like, I have a healthy opinion of my own taste and ability to find good material, but I think being the person that created this process that found the good scripts, increased my level of visibility as a junior development executive. And people were often asking for my opinion about, have you read anything good lately? What do you think about this, etc. I think the real change for the annual Blacklist happened when Juno and Lars and the Real Girl, shortly after that reveal happened, were nominated for Best Original Screenplay, because they were in the number 2 and number 3 screenplays on that first list, which meant that if you made these weird little scripts that were on this list, you made money and won awards, which is a strong driving force for any activity in Hollywood. And so I think it created a virtuous cycle where more people started paying attention to the scripts that were on the list. They then got involved in these amazing scripts that were on it because the scripts themselves were amazing. And then, you've seen the success of these scripts over the last 19 years, because when you have a great screenplay that talented people invest in to make it, you have a better chance at great success with the movie itself.
I think you have to have it's very rare that you would have a subpar script in a great movie. I'm sure it's happened once or twice, but it seems like one begets the other.
Yeah, I think it's virtually impossible to make a great movie from a bad script. I think it's possible to make a bad movie from a good script because millions of decisions are made between the page and the screen. But the best business plan is always going to be a good story well told on the page. And I think in some ways the Blacklist validates this. Harvard Business School did a study on the list just before the pandemic and found that movies made from scripts on the Blacklist, controlling for all other factors, make 90% more in revenue than movies made from scripts not on the Blacklist. And I think it's really important that when I cite data like this, it's not because I made those movies. I didn't produce them, didn't direct them, didn't gaff them, didn't do craft service on them. And the credit for the individual movies absolutely goes to the people who made them. What I think we can take some credit though for is building a metal detector that finds things that when good talented people invest them overperform. And I think we also, Harvard Business School sort of proves the hypothesis that if you start with a great screenplay, put aside questions about genre and cast and the studio and how much money you invest in it, controlling for all other factors, if you have a great script, you're going to do better than the market because there's a lot of value in a good story well told.
This metal detector comparison now has me I'm having visions of you with socks on and sandals on a beach with one of these.
I've used like a barn with a bunch of haystacks as the metaphor, but yeah, it's the same idea. There's globally there's an infinite field of those haystacks, and so the idea of being able to come back to the barn, which we'll sort of think of as these industries, with a bushel full of needles and say, hey, maybe start here, is how I sort of metaphorically think about a lot of the work that we do.
Yeah. And I mean, it's I want to say more than 400 screenplays that have been on the Blacklist have been produced. And some of the bigger films are Spotlight, Slumdog Millionaire, and The King's Speech. I think did all of those win Best Picture?
Those three won Best Picture, as did Argo, which are the 4 Best Pictures that have come from the annual list, which is crazy. Yeah. I think the numbers are this will be the 20th year of the list in December. There have been roughly 1,500 scripts on the list. About a third of them have been produced. They've made $28 billion in worldwide box office, 4 Best Pictures and 11 screenwriting Oscars since 2007. I think 50 Oscars total from 300 nominations. And again, credit for those movies goes to the people who made them. I think it's really important that I say that over and over again. But I think we did a very good job in finding the things that when talented people invest in them become very special.
So what the Blacklist is doing in essence is crowdsourcing an opinion. It's like the wisdom of the crowd, which is telling the industry which scripts are really resonant. And there's something that I read from you that I want to read back to you because it's a very salient quote. You say, the Blacklist is asking a different question than the market does. We are asking what scripts people love. The market requires that they answer which scripts do you think will result in a profitable movie. And that seems really central because on the surface, it might seem to people listening wow, wouldn't the people at the movie studios know which scripts are good if it's this obvious? Or you know what I'm saying? But no, it's because they're operating from an entirely different kind of paradigm.
Well, what's interesting about that is the people that I'm surveying are the people at the studios and the production companies, right? So they are, and I understand why they make the decisions given the paradigm that they do. Their job is their business, right? They're trying to figure out which things they can make and be profitable. And there's a lot of conventional wisdom around what can be profitable in the marketplace, right? And there were things that I was told when I was a junior executive, female-driven action doesn't work. Now, if you ask somebody to justify that claim with data, they can't because it's not true. But that is something that we were told, and a lot of executives were told and have talked about this. This is just a rule of what's viable in the marketplace. And what I think the Blacklist proves is that people at the studios, people at production companies do have really good taste. They are really good at identifying the things that are good and will be profitable. But when they're thinking with their profit hat on, they remove some of the things that they love because they think that the rest of the audience isn't going to love them. But when you just ask them, what are the things you love? They do a pretty good job of identifying the things that audiences will love too, because most of these executives started as fans. The reason they work in film and television is because they love movies and television. And if you ask them about the stuff they love, what they love will be very similar to the stuff that audiences love. So if they trusted their own judgment about these are the things that are great, they would probably end up making better choices in terms of their financial investments that would also serve the marketplace as well.
And so where do you think stand today with the Blacklist in so far as film is concerned? Like it's grown from the original 79 executives and studio assistants. How many people are you surveying?
So this year, I'd say that what I can say for sure, I don't want to reveal too much about the 20th annual Blacklist, which will come out in mid-December, but, more people voted for this year's list than have ever voted before. The requirements to vote have not changed, but I think just as the years have gone on, more people in the industry are excited to participate in this annual process. So, we're talking about 500 roughly voters for the 2024 Blacklist. That'll come out in mid-December. And then on top of the annual survey that we do, we launched a website 12 years ago where initially screenplays, then pilots, then plays, and now novels. People can create a writer profile on the website and list all the, introduce themselves to the world, think Wikipedia page or IMDb profile, but specifically tailored for writers. And that's free. They can list everything they've ever written, regardless of format, screenplay, novel, whatever, and make that searchable in an industry database that's only accessible to approved industry professionals in the space that they're writing. And then they can also upload their work, host it on the website to make it immediately downloadable to those industry professionals, and then also pay for feedback from readers that we've hired who've worked in the industry, who have some knowledge of the actual marketplace for material in film, in television, in theater, and now in fiction. And when those readers are particularly enthusiastic about material, we then start telling everybody in those industries, hey, here's a really good piece of material. You should probably pay attention to it. And then we step aside. We're a platform. Our hands aren't in people's pockets. If you sell your screenplay for $1 million, you don't owe us a dime. We'd love it if you tell us that happened so we can brag about you and about our role in helping make that happen. But we're connecting people within the industry and helping people get feedback in a transparent, accountable way so that, they know where they stand vis-a-vis the quality that would be necessary for them to have, a long-term aspiration at this kind of stuff.
So the Blacklist is like an accelerant. It's kind of adding some juice to worthy projects and hopefully getting them into the right hands more quickly than they might otherwise get there.
That's exactly right. I think it's a spotlight. It's an accelerant. Our job is to find great stuff and tell the world about it. I'm nothing else if not a hype man for the things that I think are good. And I think the Blacklist has been built to be a sort of industrialized version of that.
So before we get to this recent shift into literature and books, I want to just ask you a little bit more about Hollywood and how insular it can be. And especially how insular I think it can seem to people who are on the outside, who don't maybe live in Los Angeles or have access to the place or the people who work within this business, and what that has been like for you, like what your perception of it is and how you feel it might be bettered.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Hollywood, I think the culture industries generally have been distant from most people. I think that, we all are fans of this stuff, but making the transition from being a fan to being a writer of, let's say, screenplays initially, and limit it to Hollywood, to being a professional at that stuff can feel totally impenetrable because it really is and has historically been an industry of well, do I know a person who can vouch for the quality of my work, who can then recommend it to somebody who can then do something with it? And that's really what the Blacklist is trying to break down. I mean, look, I grew up Black in West Central Georgia. I was really good at math and I was a decent soccer player. Like in many ways, it would have been easier for me to be an astronaut than it would have been for me to find my way to working professionally in Hollywood. And the only reason it did happen, I got my first job in Hollywood as an assistant at Creative Artist Agency because a friend from college had a friend who was working there. The only reason I knew that friend is because I went to Harvard. And the only reason I got into Harvard is because I was a weird, freakish math nerd when I was 16 years old. I don't know that I was the most qualified person for that job at Creative Artist Agency or any of the jobs that I've had in Hollywood since then. I was just the person who could get in the room. And I could get in the room because I had a set of social relationships that got me into that room, unrelated to my merit or talent, right? And I think that that's not great. It's not great for the people who aspire to work in those industries. And it's really not great for the industries themselves because they're not getting the best talent that they possibly could to do those jobs or to write those movies or to direct those movies that they hope to make money on. You know, I've used this analogy recently and I like it in part because it's funny. Like, imagine if the NBA said, oh, you want to be a professional basketball player? Our headquarters are in Midtown Manhattan. Move to New York City, play basketball at the courts near our headquarters. Someone will probably see you, and then we'll assign you to a team. Or, you know, or if you know somebody who works in the NBA front office, like, you know, connect with them and they'll connect with us and point you towards what you should do. And that really has been, you know, historically the advice that people gave to aspiring screenwriters. You want to be a writer? Okay, submit to the Academy screenwriting competition. If you place in the top 100, someone will probably call you. Otherwise, move to Los Angeles, get a job at Starbucks, network until someone pays attention to you. And that's not possible for most people, but that has nothing to do with whether or not they're a talented writer. And not only do we need to fix that for the writers who want to be professional writers, we need to fix it to the industry because we're losing if we're not finding the people who can write the best stuff that will result in the best possible movies and television that will, you know, allow audiences to fall in love with them. And so I think the blacklist exists in large part to try to solve that problem. Not just for the benefit of aspiring writers, to be clear, if it might even be of a greater benefit to the industries themselves. And I also think it's important that I say, I don't believe that everybody that works in these industries has tried to be exclusionary. I think there is also the reality that there's a superabundance of material out there and there's no efficient way to go through all of that material to find the good stuff. And so we default to the sort of triage of, oh, well, this person has recommended things to me before, an agency, a graduate film program, a person that I know socially. But that's not the most efficient way to find the best things. You know, it may be the best available in the absence of anything else, but we're trying to provide like a truly meritocratic system where what matters is what's on the page. And no matter who you know, who you're connected with, who your dad went to college with, if the work is on the page, you should have an opportunity to have the opportunities that befit your merit. It shouldn't matter who you know or where you live or anything like that.
I was just going to say, you must have examples at this point of writers who are living far afield from Los Angeles or New York who are selling their screenplays and finding a receptive audience in Hollywood, right?
Yeah, I mean, probably my favorite recent example of this, there was a writer who uploaded their screenplay. It was a John Madden biopic, funnily enough, to the Blacklist website. And a week after uploading it, it got a very high score. I got an email from a producer named Todd Black, Academy Award nominated producer, saying, hey, I'd love to get in touch with this writer. Their contact information wasn't on their cover page. Can you connect us? And I connected this writer to Todd. Todd ended up optioning the script. I believe it's set up at Amazon now. I think Nicolas Cage is attached to play John Madden. Do with that what you will. But the writer, Cameron Clark, still lives in Northwest Arkansas. Had gone to film school at the University of Texas, but couldn't afford to move to Los Angeles and moved back home with his wife and new child, and still lives in Arkansas and was able to sort of launch their career because the script was good, not because they moved to LA and knew the right people. And there are a lot of examples of that. I use that one just because it's relatively recent, and there's something about the perception gap of what LA is and what Arkansas is to emphasize just how large that gap is. But there are people in Los Angeles who don't have those relationships, and we hope to be the bridge if the work is good to tell everybody, hey, you should be paying attention to that person, because again, it shouldn't matter where you live. What matters is what's on the page. And look, you may have to move to LA if you want to have a long-term career, especially as a TV writer, but you shouldn't have to move to LA on your own dime to launch that career. It should be happening because there's concrete opportunity available to you, earned by the quality of your work. And I think we can be the spotlight accelerant exactly to make that happen more efficiently.
And the curator, There's a
Yeah,
curatorial process that's happening on your end.
absolutely.
That's what's so valuable, I would imagine, to the studios and to the development companies, because
That's exactly
like you
right.
say, there's a superabundance of material and you're helping to sift through it and to use the metal detector to find the gold.
Yeah, and we have to have a very, our metal detector has to be good. We have to be consistently finding good stuff, or people aren't going to care what we recommend. And we have to have a pretty narrow filter on saying this is worth your time, because people's time is valuable. And if we recommend something that they don't at least understand or appreciate why we would recommend it, even if it's not for them, they're not likely to pay attention to us next time we recommend something. So it's a balance. It's a delicate one, but the goal is make sure that the people who we recommend things to trust us, and make sure that the people who are submitting things can trust that when we do find things that are good and tell people about it, they'll pay attention.
So that brings up the question of how you manage the evaluation process. That's got to be a big challenge for you, to have the readers and to get the feedback and to have all of the communication between yourself and the readers
Yeah.
handled properly. Like, that's got to be a big part of what you do, right?
It is. I mean, I think the first thing is hiring good readers who have experience and can communicate their opinions on material in a way that is valuable to writers and valuable to the industry. So all of our readers, regardless of format, have worked for at least a year as at least assistants evaluating material in the format in which they're reading. If you're a reading screenplays for us, you've worked as an assistant at a production company or an agency reading screenplays and providing feedback on them. We then vet people based on the quality of their feedback, and we have them do a sample feedback in our format to make sure that's good. And only if that is all well done do we invite them to read for us. And then suffice it to say, without sort of getting too into the nitty gritty, we're constantly monitoring the quality of work that our readers do to make sure that basically they hew to our standards. I'll also say that one of the ways that differs, I think, most of the places you can submit your material, you submit it and you never hear back anything. Or you may hear back that, yes, we received it, we evaluated it, and we're not moving forward. When you pay for feedback on the Blacklist website, you get your feedback. You can read what the reviewer said about it. And if, for example, if you ever read, our readers are human and they may have a bad day. They may get a protagonist name wrong. There may be a copy and paste issue. They're working in another window when they write up your feedback and there's no alien invasion in your script. Email customer support. Like, it's there, A, which I think is singular, but B, not only can you contact customer support if your feedback indicates less than a full and close reading of your material, I want you to, because A, we want to make it right. We want to replace it if it's bad. And B, I want to make sure that those readers don't continue reading for us if they're not doing their job at the level of performance that we expect. So that's one, is hire good readers and give them an infrastructure where they have things to read and are held accountable for the quality of work. I think the second thing, and I'm really proud of this, is how we assign material. So no reader is reading in a format that they don't have expertise in. And again, to be clear, like on the fiction side, okay, maybe you read for your production company, you read novels for your production company and gave feedback in the context of movies reading fiction. That's not adequate. For books, for example, you have to have read books for books' sake. People who've read screenplays are reading them for screenplay's sake, and vice versa. So that's one, is you're reading in an area that you have professional expertise. Second is by genre. I don't want people who are, romantasy fans reading horror. If they don't want to read horror, they need to have genre preferences that reflect what we're assigning to them. And then the last thing is, when our readers are onboarded, there's a list of things that they may not want to read about. They might not want to read about animal abuse, gunplay, sexual assault, whatever. When you upload your material to the website as a writer, you indicate what is included in that, and we negatively match based on that content. Because I don't want a writer evaluated by someone who can't, for whatever reason, give a quote unquote unbiased, to the extent that that's possible for anybody, feedback on the material. But I also don't want our readers reading the not great versions of any subject that they may find sensitive. And I have an obligation to make sure that our readers are protected from that as well. So again, I think that's a solution. Shout out to Kate and Shelby on the Blacklist team who came up with that is unique in the space, but has also just been done to be better for everybody. And to the extent that we can create solutions that are tides that raise all boats, it's always going to be a priority of ours.
So what about a really underdone. Let's be kind. Like a really underdone script.
Yeah.
That somebody submits, or a novel, and your reader picks it up, and 5 pages in, it's just, maybe even 1 page in, it's just clear. But you give it a shot, and you get 10 pages in, and it's obvious that this thing is not ready for prime time.
Yeah.
Do they have to finish it, or can they just say, this isn't right, give feedback, say try again?
No, I think it's really important that the reader reads the whole thing. And I think, yes, sometimes 1, 5, 10 pages in that this is just nowhere near ready. Part of our job, part of the role that we play, and I think part of our value is, even in those cases, giving a writer that reader's impression of how, here's what's working, if anything, and here's what's not working, and how to think about improving that. So we're not giving sort of notes in the sense of like, you should change this, you should change this. The format of the feedback is some numerical scores in various categories, roughly 250 words on the strengths of the thing, what's working, roughly 250 words on the weaknesses, what's not working, and then 100 to 150 words on that reader's opinion on the commercial prospects of the work. And to be clear also, the ratings are not based on some sort of objective criteria. I don't believe in an objective standard of art. 2 people may differ on the quality of something, and neither person is wrong if they're being good faith actors. What we ask our readers to say is, rate these things on a scale of 1 to 10 based on how likely you would be to recommend it to a peer or superior in the industry. We want to capture that subjectivity. We want to capture that, like, that thing when you finish something and you're like, I have to tell everybody in the world how amazing this is, right? Or conversely, I would not wish this on my greatest enemy. Like, I may still hate you, but human to human, don't waste your time reading this. That's really what we're trying to capture. One thing we've done on the book side of that, and I think we did this for a lot of incentive structure reasons. Our readers are only evaluating a 100-page excerpt. I didn't want a reader reading 800 pages of something they know from page 2 is going to be just interminable and brutal. I also didn't want to incentivize a writer to pay what would be a fair wage to a reader to read something that is, let's say, 800 pages long and brutal from page 2. So we sort of split the difference. We're going to evaluate 100 pages. Our readers will read all of that excerpt. In the case of a screenplay or pilot, they're going to read all of the screenplay or pilot. They're going to give you feedback on that. And sometimes that feedback may be, hey, you got a lot of work to do. But they are going to read everything. They're going to give the writer the respect that their time and their money, frankly, deserves. And if they don't, you should contact customer service, because they should, and we will make it right.
So I'm curious if the blacklist has ever missed, like, if has a screenplay ever been produced that came through, but just didn't make the blacklist, but then it went on to do really well? Like,
certainly screenplays have missed from the annual blacklist and been very successful. I think it's very important that I just say, like, obviously there are things that are not on the blacklist that are great. There are definitely movies that come out and I'm like, oh, I wish people had voted for that so it could have been on the blacklist and I could brag about it. But some things just, the blacklist is just a survey of the things people read and love. So if something isn't broadly exposed in the industry, enough people aren't even going to know about it to vote it to be on the blacklist. So I don't think people should ever assume that something is not good because it wasn't on the blacklist. Just like I don't think people should assume that something is good because it's on the blacklist. Fundamentally, what the annual blacklist is an indication that a bunch of people liked this. You still have to read it and decide whether you liked it, because again, I just don't believe in an objective standard for these sorts of things. So it's more, these things might be more worth your time because we've gotten third-party confirmation that other people have liked it. But that doesn't mean that you're going to like it. I mean, there are plenty of things every year on the list that I read, and I'm like, I disagree with the X number of people that voted for it. But I think that's kind of also what we're trying to capture, is that there are different opinions on these things. And maybe we can gather some of these opinions up to identify some signal within the noise of everybody's opinion. On the website, I'm not aware of any script that was submitted to the website, like got a bunch of low scores and then went on to be very successful. I assume if that happened, someone would tell us, if only out of spite, and I would respect that. I would respect the hell out of that pettiness, by the way, and I would also congratulate them and say, look, our readers got it wrong. The readers that was assigned this didn't love it, but clearly the audience did. And again, I think that's the other thing I'd say is, if you get feedback from the blacklist, it doesn't mean that your thing is bad. I think it's really important to take on board the feedback that the reader provided as the opinion of one person that does have some expertise. But by no means does that, if 5 people say, I didn't like this, does that mean that it's bad? Does that mean no one's going to like it? I don't think that it does. I think that we try to be very aware of the limitations of the service that we can provide in a highly subjective space, and then provide guidance around, okay, this might be worth people's time. We can't recommend this in good conscience, but that by no means, there's no absolute declaration on something's value just because 1 or 5 or 10 people liked it. We're trying to gather those opinions and share them in a way that's most valuable. But I'd be horrified if people took any absolute declaration of value from anything that we do or say.
So after it's almost 20 years now, about to be 20 years that the Blacklist has been in existence. And not too long ago, you added literature to the Blacklist portfolio or its offerings. And I'm curious to know what prompted that and how things are going so far and what the reception has been from the publishing industry.
Yeah. So I'd say maybe 5 years ago, friends of mine who worked in the publishing space, would say, hey, it's really interesting what you're doing on the screenplay and then television side. And we think there's a lot of similarities between sort of the dynamics of the way material is found on the book side and the way they're found on the film and television side. And there may be an opportunity to solve, some of the problems around querying and the slush pile that we have in the publishing space with this platform. And I'll be honest, I was sort of resistant to it initially. The Blacklist was sort of purpose built for the film and the film space specifically, and then television and theater. And I didn't want to be like, hey, I'm from Hollywood and I'm here to solve your problems. Like, that's a terrible look under any circumstance. And I just have a lot of respect for authors and publishing, and I didn't want to be presumptuous. But eventually that drumbeat from people who I trusted became unignorable. And Howie Sanders, actually, he used to be an agent at UTA, and Anonymous Content deserves a special notice here because he was adamant. I don't know if he had a calendar reminder to just check in with me about whether I changed my mind, but he was a regular interrogator of me about that. And eventually said, look, Franklin, I'm going to set you up on a bunch of meetings with people in the publishing ecosystem. You tell them how you would go about doing that and be very direct with them about asking them where you're wrong and just see how it goes. And, I took about 20 meetings that he set up for me and came back to him. I was like, all right, I was wrong. You're right. There's an opportunity here. We're going to continue to explore it. And so I'd say those conversations started at the beginning of 2023. I spent most of 2023 taking sort of general meetings, doing an eliciting tour of the publishing ecosystem, writers, agents, editors, like everyone that would talk to me saying, this is what I'm thinking. This is how I would do it. Tell me where I'm wrong. And what I consistently heard was, no, this is actually really interesting. I had a conversation in December of last year with Randy Winston, who was then head of writer programs at the Center for Fiction and had come highly recommended to me as a person that I should talk to. It became very clear that he was the right person to run the fiction expansion of the Blacklist. So I brought him on board top of 2024. We continued to have sort of listening tour meetings as we began building the thing that we had gotten positive feedback on, and launched at the beginning of September 4th, if I remember correctly. And the response has been, frankly, overwhelming. I've been to New York twice since we launched it. Those trips have just been meetings with the big 5 houses, meetings with the book departments, all of the major sort of talent agencies, but also specifically the literary agencies, just sort of saying, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. We'd love to get you guys memberships. And frankly, it has far exceeded my best hopes for the level of interest, which again, I think reflects everybody wants to find good books. And if we are coming into people's offices and saying, hey, we're going to help you find all the stuff that you haven't found yet, and we're going to make it really easy for you, and we're not going to ask you for our hand's not going to be in your pocket once you find it, of course they're going to respond well. And that's really proven to be the case. So, like I said, last week in New York, I was there for National Book Award week. We had meetings with, a majority of the big 5 and dozens of editors at each of them saying, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. And people were like, this is incredible. We look forward to what you find. I think on the writer side, submissions have begun to come in at a steady pace. We're finding a lot of things that are really good. The sort of threshold for like really kicking up the level of amplification that we give is an 8 out of 10 from one of our readers overall. That represents about 3.5% of the evaluations that we have done. And, reading the pitches on those books, some of them I'm like excited to read for pleasure over the holidays, whether they get published or not. There are 2 or 3 that I'm just thinking of right now where I'm like, yep, that's a book that I would read just based on the description of it. And people are starting to download those, and who knows what will come of it. Like I can't make any promises that those books are going to get acquired or go on to great success, but I'm very confident that as people continue to submit, we're going to find some really strong things, and that when we recommend them to people on the publishing side of the business, the reps and the publishing houses, there's real interest in the things that we're recommending. And if we do our job right, there should be some very exciting things that happen in the future.
So just so people listening who might be interested, if there are writers out there listening,
yeah,
can you just describe how it works from the writer side, just so people are totally clear?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're a writer, whether you're unpublished, self-published, or published, you should create a profile on the Blacklist website, which is totally free of charge. That's like a bio, your contact information or your rep's contact information, and then you can list everything that you've written, title, by you. You can classify it by genre, by a series of like 700 tags that we have about locations and eras and, the identity of the protagonist, et cetera, et cetera. And then a brief description of your book. So that indexes it in our database. And on the other side of the ecosystem, we have industry professionals from the film and television industries, the theater industry, but also now the publishing industry. And the listing of material is particularly valuable if you're trying to get the attention of film and television people for your book. Again, whether unpublished, self-published, or published. Because let's say a producer wakes up in the morning and says, I'd love to find a family drama set in the Deep South. They can do that search, and anything that's by that description, there'll be a list of that information, and they can either contact your agent, they can contact you via the website and say, hey, that pitch sounds really interesting. I'm looking for something like it. Can you send it over to me? Or you can go buy it and then contact the agent, whatever. So I'd say everybody should create a writer profile. It's free. It takes you about 5 minutes to create. If you have an unpublished or self-published novel that you would like to make immediately downloadable for the film and television people or the publishing industry people that are on the website, you can pay $30 a month to host your work. And $30 per manuscript per month to host your work. And that'll make it immediately downloadable, again, as part of that database. So when people go looking for something specific, they find that you've written something like that, they can download that immediately. If they want to reach out to you, they can reach out to you directly, either via the website or your contact information or your agent's contact information that's on your cover page. I encourage everybody to put the right contact information on their cover page, because people might not email us on the website, and we don't need to control the communication. However they choose to reach out to you, we don't care. We just love for them to reach out to you. And then the second thing is once you have material hosted on the site, you can pay for feedback. You're basically getting feedback on a 100-page excerpt, 90 to 100-page excerpt of that novel. We strongly recommend it be the first 90 to 100 pages. We don't require it, but let's be realistic. What people want to read is the first 90 to 100 pages, particularly on the publishing side. Our readers provide you feedback on that 100 pages, standard Blacklist format, some numerical scores, strengths, weaknesses, commercial prospects. If that overall score from one of our readers is 8 out of 10 or better, you get a free month of hosting and additional free feedback. We want to keep the best stuff on the site. We also don't want to create an incentive structure where if you think you have something good, you're incentivized to pay us more money. If you have something good, you should not have to pay us more money to get more visibility on your material. We're going to give you free feedback. If any of that free feedback results in an 8+ score, you're getting more free feedback and more hosting, potentially in an endless loop. After 5 8+ scores, our attitude is like, okay, we get it. It's very good. We're not going to give you more free feedback to like tell us again just how good it is. We will host it for free for as long as you want to host it on the website, and we'll give sort of special visibility to the things that have gotten that much positive feedback. Also, as part of our fiction launch, we launched with 2 partnerships. They're more forthcoming. One is an unpublished novel award. Next year, we'll award one writer in 7 different genres an unpublished novel award that will include $10,000 cash in pocket no transaction for rights. You will continue to own all rights to your manuscript. The judges for that are particularly exciting. LeVar Burton is judging in sci-fi and fantasy. Roxane Gay is judging in the thriller category. Emily Nimmons, former editor-in-chief of Paris Review, is judging in literary fiction, as is Eric Simonoff, a big deal WME book agent. And then we also have a partnership with Simon Kinberg's production company, Genre Films. He's probably best known for producing The Martian, which was self-published at the time. So he was like, oh yeah, you're definitely going to find some things that I want to option for film and television. And he committed to optioning one manuscript that we help him find for $25,000 for an 18-month option. Once you have your work hosted on the site and have gotten one evaluation, submitting to all of those opportunities, those two and the more that are coming, is totally free of charge. There's no additional fees related to that. Again, the idea is, how do we create an incentive structure where if you have something good, or we start to have a sense that you have something good, you don't need to spend more money to have all of those opportunities available to you. And also, when you have your work hosted, we give you visibility on the volume of people that have gone to your manuscript page, the volume of people that have downloaded your manuscript. And if you're not getting traffic on the site, like, we're not going to recommend things that aren't getting high scores. If you're not getting traffic on the site, stop giving us your money. Take it down, do a rewrite, consider other platforms. But our job is to find great things and recommend them. And if you are getting traffic, great. Continue to, host it, pay the fees related to it. But again, if you're hosting it, you're paying your $30 a month and no one is looking, we'll take your money, but you probably should stop giving it to us.
And from the publisher and agency side, you spoke to this a little bit earlier, but I want to make sure that anybody from those realms is clear as well how it works in terms of their ability to access material and to participate in the Blacklist ecosystem.
So if you're a publishing industry professional, it's probably going to be mainly agents and people working at the publishing houses, editors and folks like that. But all the way down to assistants, by the way, because my hope is that anybody who's on the Blacklist website should be the kind of person that can substantially advance a writer's project or career in the normal course of their business day. And an assistant, if they read something great, they can walk into their boss's office, slam it down on the desk and say, you need to read this. This is amazing. So if you're one of those people, you can apply to Blacklist industry membership. You have to be approved in order to have access to our database, because we don't want, frankly, randoms accessing people's work, having access to that easily. So you apply to industry membership. My team reviews those applications. If you're a person like I described, you'll be approved. You'll be invited to join the site. You can then sign on. You can go searching for whatever you're looking for. If you're looking for a Latino YA novel, you can do that search, and we're going to give you a list. There'll either be things that are listed as part of people's writer profiles, or there'll be things that are directly downloadable, possibly with feedback associated with them. And then also, once a week, we send out an email. It's usually on Mondays. These are the best things that our readers read last week. So those are the 8+ scores. Again, 3.5% of the evaluations that we've done. It's a very, very high standard, because we don't want to recommend things if you read it and say, why do I care what you guys think? Not everything we recommend is going to be for everybody, but we want to leave people with the impression like, yes, I understand why they recommended it. And I will definitely be back to find things that are more like the things that I'm looking for that are this good. We send you an email once a week saying these are the best things that we found, and you can click a button, go to the website, download them, read them there. Or in that email, there's usually a button that just says send to inbox, and we'll send you the PDF directly to your inbox, and you can read at your leisure.
Does your background as a math nerd help you run this business? I have to believe it, because I think it does. You're a creative guy, and you're clearly like a lover of language and film and all the rest, but this math skill.
I don't want to overstate it too much. I was really good at math when I was 16. I think that there are part of my transition from math as my primary pursuit to, let's say, the liberal arts had to do with, getting to Harvard and realizing that there's a very big difference between being good at math in Georgia and being good at math at Harvard. So I certainly don't want to overstate any talent that I have in that direction. But I think my brain always just is always thought about systems and how we can make things a little bit more efficient, particularly in spaces where subjectivity exists, where there's different opinions on things. Like, how do we optimize information so that it can be of value to everybody who might derive value from it, even if there's disagreement about what value any individual thing has. And so I think that's kind of where my strengths, to the extent that I have them, lie. I personally think I'm probably a pretty good writer, but I'm not a great writer. And I know the difference between the two. And I think my value is probably helping people who are great writers have the opportunities that they deserve. And frankly, this is all a very selfish way for me to just watch better things and read better things. And I've just built this machine so that when I don't want to leave my house, there's better things for me to watch and better things for me to read. But we built it in such a way that I think it benefits everybody. So I don't feel that bad about the in part wholly selfish impulse about just wanting better things available to me personally.
You've built an ingenious personal content curation system.
I mean, that's kind of, look, if we're being really honest about it, that is part of it. It's just that I've built it in such a way that it can be individualized for everybody.
Well, I think that great businesses often are born out of frustration. And I think that being a development executive early in your career, or being an assistant at CAA and fielding scripts and reading and just dealing with that superabundance of content and material, but knowing that most of it isn't where it needs to be, and then trying to make sense of all that. I can see exactly how you ended up here. And it's just like, kudos to you for sorting out a way, because it definitely is, working on like a serious need.
Well, it's really funny, just to bring it back all the way back to the beginning. When I first made the annual Blacklist survey, it was undeniably a selfish impulse. It was, my job is to find good things. I am not doing a good job at that. I have to find the good things. How can I do that? All right, I'll take this survey. And I guess the only way to get people to participate is to offer them the survey as well. And I didn't fully appreciate that everybody felt like they were doing a bad job of finding good material. And so when I solved the problem for myself, I was solving it for everybody else. And that's what made it a thing. But I definitely early in my career thought, I'm bad at my job. Everybody else is doing a great job of finding good things. So I have to come up with a solution for myself. Really did not clock the extent to which it is the problem. That curation is the problem for everybody in these businesses, whether you're Steven Spielberg or the lowliest assistant. If you can solve that, you get to focus on the things that you actually care about, which is making and supporting the things that drew you into the business in the first place.
So a question that I wanted to ask earlier and I failed to, so I'm going to ask it now, a little bit out of order, is whether or not writers who are represented can put their work up on the blacklist. Is there any rule around that? Like, if you're an author and you have literary representation, is it okay for you to put your work up there?
Absolutely. I mean, here's the reality, right? No agent can be actively advocating for every single thing their client has written at all times to everyone who could theoretically be interested in it. It's just not possible. Right. There's just too many things there's too many things their clients have written. There are too many possible venues that might be interested in the material. And so having a platform where the other side of that equation can go looking and then call a rep if that thing exists and say, hey, I'd like to know more about that, is part of the reason that we exist. Whether that's foreign buyers or a foreign producer, we had a screenplay from two Americans from outside of Atlanta, Georgia, get the Arabic language rights to their script option so that Image Nation Abu Dhabi could turn it into a movie that ended up premiering at the London Film Festival. And I think it was Netflix's first ever Arabic language acquisition. It's a movie called Zinzana. It is impossible that the manager that those writers found on the Blacklist website could have known that Image Nation Abu Dhabi was looking for a screenplay exactly like what they had written. And you wouldn't have said, okay, well, on my list of things to do today is call Image Nation Abu Dhabi and say, hey, are you looking for an English language contained thrower that you can translate into Arabic and then make as an Arabic language film? But them being able to search for it meant that piece of that script could become that was an incoming call that turned old business into new business, and probably business that no one ever thought was possible. So part of the reason for, if you have a rep, making it available on the website or making the information about it available via listing is to solve exactly that problem. It's Google for material. it doesn't exist anywhere else. And when people find it, they can reach out to your agent as opposed to you directly to represent you in that acquisition or sale. But it's interesting. We had this came up in a few of our conversations with agencies in New York. Hey, we went out on submission. Nothing really happened. Can they put their work on the Blacklist website? And it's like, yeah, because you probably didn't go out to everyone on earth who might have wanted to buy it. You definitely didn't go out to every film or television person who might be interested in the subject matter and may want to option it, even if it's unpublished. So to provide a marketplace with, frictionless information around that, I think is probably our greatest value.
So having done this for a couple of decades and having read a ton and had all the work experiences that you've had, I understand that the evaluation of creative material is totally subjective.
Yeah.
But when you think back on the scripts that have emerged from the Blacklist process and have made it to the screen and have won awards, or you think of the works of fiction that are rising with the Blacklist's foray into literature, do you see common denominators? Like, are there things that you've learned about storytelling that might benefit people listening who are writers? Like, what is it about work that resonates? Is there a common thread?
I mean, I don't know if there's a common thread to everything, but I do think that there are things that seem to be a mark of things that people, audiences, industry professionals do respond to. I'd say the first thing is ambition. I think that there's a tendency, and I see this more in screenplays. I'm relatively new to the publishing world, so I don't know that I can say this, but there's a tendency in the screenplay world to write something that is slightly better than the worst thing that came out the previous weekend, right? And, that must be good enough. That movie got made, and my script is better than that terrible movie, so why isn't my script attracting interest? And I think that good enough is never good enough. There are so few things that get the kind of resources necessary to make a movie, because there's a lot of resources. And even in the book world, like it's a lot cheaper to put a book into the world, but there's still a lot of people's labor, a lot of people's time, and some money that goes into putting those things out in the world. Be wildly ambitious with what you're trying to do and say in the book. And that doesn't mean it has to be like global stakes, the world's going to explode if this doesn't happen. But like whatever it is that you're trying to do should feel like something that makes a person read it and say, oh my God, I have to tell everybody about this. So like aspire for greatness, I'd say, is the first thing. The second thing is to be very specific. I think a lot of people will write things, I don't want to say tropey or stereotypical, but I do think there's a tendency to say, okay, I'm writing this kind of thing, and therefore it needs to be generally like this. I think the more specific you can be about your storytelling, about who your characters are, like I should be able to walk, like, whether it's a novel or a screenplay, I should be able to walk past this person on the street and be like, oh, yep, that's that person, right? And the more specific that you can be about the interior and exterior lives of your characters, I think that's a real mark of distinction, something that I see in common, like a real effort to be specific and vivid about the story that you're trying to tell. I think.
Well, I want to interrupt you. I want to interrupt you just because there's a script that I think was on the Blacklist that is coming to mind, and I'm blanking on the name. It's about the drummer, and it won an Oscar.
Oh, Whiplash. Whiplash, yeah.
Whiplash. So that to me is a prime example of something that's like so specific. And if you pitched it to me verbally, I'd be like, well, maybe, I guess I'd have to read it, right. But
like I'm not a drummer. I don't really care about jazz band. Like, why? Yeah. But I think, and it's interesting, that's the corollary I think I was going to say about both those things. In that specificity, there needs to be something that is universal to the human experience and emotional. We may not be a jazz drummer. We may not be, but we've all been in a situation where we want something desperately. We're willing to go to extraordinary lengths to get it. And there is something that is making that attempt more difficult or challenging, or a mentor that we don't know if we can trust or not. Like those things are universal, right? And to the extent that you can sort of fuse a very specific human story with something that is, identifiable in the human experience for anybody, no matter who they are and where they are. If you can do those two things together, you probably have something really special. And the last thing I'd say is just emotion, period. I don't think that a lot of writing movies can be highly cerebral and intellectual, and I think that's important. I think we should be interrogating the world in which we live and having very smart, literate conversations about these things. But I think the best stuff usually also operates on a level that's more in our stomachs than in our brains. And to the extent that you can elicit an emotional experience from a reader, you're going to have a lot better. You're going to have a lot better response typically. And then the last thing I'll say is keep it interesting. I know when I'm reading something special or when I'm watching something special, when the part of my brain that's analyzing the craft starts to turn off, because I'm just invested in the story and I care about what happens next to these people. And there's nothing more I want than to find myself just burning through pages. And then when it's over, I'm frankly a little sad that I can't spend more time in this world with these people. And again, I don't know that that's going to guarantee that I'm going to want to option your script or buy your book. But if I get through something and that's my emotional state, my next thought is, okay, how do I figure this out? Like if I was going to do it, like how much is this going to cost to make? How much do I think I can make? Right. Then I'm going to transition to the business thing. But if you can arrest a person's attention and their emotional experience of reading a thing, that's the thing that I don't think people are thinking enough about when they're writing. But again, this is just based on my experience. Hopefully everybody's thinking about that and I'm just not aware of it. But I think if people thought more about making people feel, we'd all be reading and watching stuff that we got really excited about.
Yeah, I feel like I always say it's like you got to change people's temperature. Like whatever story you're telling.
That's a great way to say it. Yeah.
That's it. And you know it when it's happening. When you're reading it or you're watching a movie, it's like it's the best feeling.
I think all of us have to know. We remember watching things. I remember when I saw Parasite, the Bong Joon-ho movie, and no spoilers, but there's something that happens halfway through that movie. I remember leaning forward at an 8 a.m. screening and saying, "Oh, I don't know if I can curse something, but like, I remember being engaged." And I remember standing outside that screening. After it was over, it was raining in New York. I was standing under an awning, just like texting every group chat I knew, like, yo, there's this Korean movie. You've got to see it the second it comes out. But we know when we see it. And it's not just industry professionals that know when we see it. We all as people know when we have an interaction with art. And like you said, changes our temperature, changes how we see the world around us. And it's hard. That's the other thing I'd say. Doing that is not easy. It is a rare thing. And this is part of why I just personally believe that writers deserve all the reverence in the world. And frankly, in the context of the film and television industry, better compensation. But that's a rant for another day.
Oh, you can always come back another day and make that rant on this show.
I would be happy to do it. There's a much longer conversation about also why paying writers is better for the industry's business. And if anybody listened to any of the interviews I did during the strike, you'll probably recognize that rant. But great stuff is hard. It is rare. And when you find people that can do it, celebrate them, reward them, seek out the things that they're doing next. Because it's special. It's why any of this stuff is special in the first place, and it's why it matters.
Well, I think that's a great place to close. It has been great to meet you and to talk with you.
You too.
And to learn about all that you're doing now in the world of books in addition to the world of film and television. Really appreciate the time, and I wish you all the best with it.
We're going to keep working mid hard to make it work. Thanks for having me.